open bragging that they want again to have the judges and magistrates vetted. Very well. Let me tell you, we are not going to allow that to happen. It will only happen if it is countrywide. And it starts, because we have been vetted twice, let it start from the other arms of government before they come to the judiciary. We are tired of being the punching bag all the time. The judiciary is not interested and does not interfere with the affairs of other arms of government. Why are they interested and interfering with our affairs? You want me to tell you why? They want to control the judiciary. They want to control the judiciary. They want to make the judiciary a puppet. We can't do that.
They want to control the judiciary and make it a puppet. Which way, judiciary? Looking at that press briefing that was given earlier by Chief Justice David Maraga, we are speaking to Kakai Kissinger, who's a lawyer. He's here in studio with us. But right now, I'd like to bring in Mutula Kilonzo Jr., who is a Senator Makueni and a lawyer as well. Mheshimiwa, thank you for joining us and for speaking to us on the big story. So there's a friend of mine who just said, when having this conversation, he said, the judiciary should be the last entity to get the law wrong. If they have been sending their budget estimates to Treasury, they're the ones on the wrong and gave Treasury defunding powers they do not have. Did judiciary get itself to where it is? How do we sort this thing out? Because ultimately every single thing seems to be crippled within the judiciary. Senator, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, so how do we sort this thing out? We've just had a conversation with Kimani Ichung'wah, who's the chair budget committee. He says we are not aware of the budget cuts that you guys are talking about. The budget for the judiciary is as it were as we passed it. A colleague, Tony Watima, who's an economist as well, very well versed with how this works, says the judiciary should be the last entity to get the law wrong. If they have been sending their budget estimates to Treasury, they're the ones on the wrong. They gave Treasury defunding powers they do not have. The judiciary get itself to where it is right now? How did we get here?
I'm not sure how we got ourselves here, but it's a very bad situation where you have the President of the Supreme Court addressing the public in a manner to suggest that his work is being impeded and that the judiciary itself is going to come to a halt at some point. The arms of government, and I remember I've been listening to Kai, the arms of government are co-equals in the separation of powers. They are actually co-equals. That means that in the new structure of the Constitution, Parliament under the Parliamentary Service Commission, the Judiciary under the Judicial Service Commission, and the Executive are co-equals, and none can interfere with the territory of the other. Kimani Ichung'wah is right, because if you are going to have budget cuts, it must go to Parliament for purposes of an amendment or what they call a supplementary budget for purposes of reallocating and reappropriating budget. What amazes me is that you are at the beginning of the second quarter, which means you have only expended the first quarter of the budget. But the CJ, as he is complaining, we went to him and told him that it was very unfortunate that an appropriation law that gave money to Parliament, the Judiciary, and the Executive was signed before we agreed on division of revenue. These are part of the repercussions. But more importantly, when the Chief Justice of Kenya, who is rendering services on behalf of the people of Kenya to everybody, complains and closes his courts in Nyeri, closes all tribunals, closes a court in Nakuru, the person who is going to suffer is the public to whom all of us, including the executive, are serving. And therefore, if we are not serving the masses and who have access to justice as a fundamental right, what are we saying? What are we talking about? What Kai talks about, the judiciary fund, it was contemplated that to have secured the independence of the judiciary, just like you have the independence of Parliament, you have a fund which cannot be touched. Trust me, if they attempt to touch the fund of parliament, you will see the hue and cry in the National Assembly particularly. So it just appears as if they're interfering with their work, but for purposes of good order and good governance. It is very unfair for a head of an institution to complain in the manner that he has complained. Because who is he complaining to? What is supposed to happen? So it's a very tidy and tardy affair, and I believe that somebody should intervene so that we don't have this sort of thing going on. Because the war on corruption, land and environmental court, people who have their rights sitting before the judges are going to be violated and will be postponed indefinitely. That is an injustice.
So when you say somebody should intervene, who is this somebody?
Parliament should intervene. If Kimani Ichung'wah, through Parliament and the Justice, particularly the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, and to correct Kai, the members of the Justice Legal Affairs Committee, but bulk of them are practicing advocates. They understand what it means to have a judiciary that cannot function. So the committee that is led by, I cannot remember now, but the Justice and Legal Affairs of the National Assembly that has the direct oversight of the Judicial Service Commission should immediately call for a meeting. Now, Kimani Ichung'wah's Committee of Finance and Budget will intervene when those issues are placed on the table to question Treasury, because this is Treasury who have invaded into the account of the Judicial Service Commission.
Okay, I hear you. And as you mentioned, the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee is actually headed by William Cheptumon. Yes, I can see a good number of lawyers in it, including Jennifer Shamala. We have Gladys Boss-Sholei. Trying to just go through the name. But yes, it's true that you have a couple of lawyers in it, so there are people who understand what exactly is going on. But finally, before I let you go, Chief Justice David Maraga says he is worried because there's someone who's out to control the judiciary and turn it into a puppet. From what you have seen in the last couple of months, from the president refusing to appoint the nominees of the Judicial Service Commission, the back and forth right now with the budget, do you get the feeling that someone is out there deliberately frustrating the judiciary and, as to use Maraga's words, turning the judiciary into a puppet?
I think it has already happened.
Wow.
I personally think it has already happened. The Chief Justice is complaining a little too late. It has already happened by them, and it started during the nomination of the previous judges, if you recall, Justice Warsame. And the statement of revisiting will come and haunt the judiciary for a long time to come. So the question of interference of the judiciary is already happening. The fact that they're discussing budgets, the fact that you can have the JSC, which is supposed to be an independent commission, being told that the part of the members of the judiciary are not fit to sit in office, suggests to the general public that the JSC itself has incompetent members as judges. That is something that should not happen in a democratic state governed by the rule of law, because the same judges that have been rejected are now sitting in other cases where they're determining the rights of individuals. Yet you are saying these people have blemish. It is so unfortunate that I'm not quite sure how you can solve this without necessarily tainting the whole judiciary and tainting the administration of justice generally. It's a very unfortunate situation. It must be solved. Otherwise, you will go to a situation we had in 2007, where somebody said, I do not trust the judiciary to resolve this issue for me. I will go to the street.
Okay, I hear you, and that's not a good place to be in. Mutula Kilonzo, Junior Senator Makueni, and lawyer as well. Thank you for being part of the big story this evening. Let me now engage Kakai Kissinger. Kakai, I listened to CJ David Maraga today, and he was asking members of the judiciary, basically saying, do the right thing. I will defend my people, but they've got to do the right thing. Why is it important for every single Kenyan to ensure, quote unquote, that the affront on judiciary does not go through? Mutula Kilonzo has alluded a little bit to it, that we go to a point where people said, we do not trust the judiciary.
I think judiciary has if you look at the history of the judiciary in this country, it has always had ups and downs. When the CJA says that we've been vetted actually 2 times, actually it's not 2 times. Judiciary has gone through 3 times in terms of vetting. There was the Ringera, there was the current recent one, and the current Attorney General did an internal vetting of the judiciary. So basically 3 times in terms of vetting. It's the only arm of government that is seen that must go through vetting, and for many reasons. One is there's been a lot of mistrust on that institution over the years. So it's a pile-up of previous mistrust in the institution. But at the end of the day, the CJ needs to remind himself, and I agree with my colleague Mutula Kilonzo, the CJ needs to remind himself with one thing, that he has the law in his side, he has the constitution on his side. He needs to interpret the constitution as it is, because that's our Njiku constitution. We gave him mandate to do specific things in the constitution, which he must adhere to. But at the same time, he must guard himself around the other arms of government and see, how do I fit in and live with these arms of government without too much fights. And I think one of the things that calls upon is to have, and I will repeat again, to have more of diplomacy in terms of handling these issues. I fear very much when you see that some courts all over the country are being shut down, and Kenyans cannot actually access justice. You see, a Kenyan gave you the responsibility to be the Chief Justice. A Kenyan gave you the responsibility to be the President. How you deal with those things up there, I don't care. I want justice to be done. So at the end of the day, it's quite unfortunate, and I saw a very frustrated Chief Justice. I really saw a very frustrated Chief Justice, especially the last of his 10 minutes. That's why he went on to more of personal things. That is a build-up of the frustrations that the CJ has been going through. But, as I said before, there are some mechanisms that the CJ can use through the NCAJ to see how does he bring that gap down, and how, if, for example, the CJ called the president and said, hey, let's have a discussion over some of these issues that affect the judiciary, or the Speaker of the National Assembly, they can have a tête-à-tête and have a discussion on this kind of a thing. So some of these things can be actually solved. At the end of the day, Linda, Kenyans want justice. The 47 million Kenyans want justice. We do not care whether courts are closing or not closing. We do not care the toughs or the wars that are ongoing within the institutions. We don't care. You are spending taxpayers' money. You must deliver justice to the Kenyans.
You've been through this. You've lived through this. Is there hope for the judiciary? Mutula Kilonzo says he's raising his concerns a little bit too late.
Yes. He has had, I think the CJ has had chances to raise these issues, but probably he never raised them. Or maybe he was trying to see, how do I fit in? You know, he's a new CJ, and also he's going through a new job. He's trying to fit in. Being in that position is a hot potato. So probably he has been trying to see, how can I come out of this? And for him to speak the way he spoke today, I think he has reached at the tail end of it, and frustrations has completely come out. But he swore into office and said he'll ensure that he upholds the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya. He will ensure that justice is delivered to all, free and fairly. We will judge him by that.
I love how you're saying, I mean, he can pick up the phone and just speak to the president and say, we have issues we need to sort out. And he can actually get the Speaker of the National Assembly and say, we have outstanding issues we need to iron out. Because whichever way, like you put it, the 3 arms of government must work together. They do not have a choice, and the judiciary cannot be allowed to cripple. That is how we end the big story this evening. A big thank you to Kakai Kissinger, who's a lawyer, who's been in studio with me. Big thank you as well to Kimani Shungwa, Chair, National Assembly Budget Committee, who spoke to our lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna, and of course, Mutula Kilonzo Jr., who's the Senator Makueni, but also a lawyer, just wading into this conversation on which way the judiciary now faces. I am Linda Ogutu. This has been the big story.